Welcome back to another video. If you are new here, thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Jazz. Here on my channel, I talk about all things fitness, business, locks, and just life in general. If you are not new here, hey girl, hey, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me for another video. And if this is not the first video you have watched of mine, but you have not yet subscribed, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That would be much appreciated. So today I am coming at y'all with a lock video, and we're going to be discussing whether or not it's necessary to establish your micro locks with a grid. Now, for all my people out there that may not know what a grid is, it's basically when it's like perfectly even, super clean, neat parting, perfect boxes, perfect squares, and it pretty much looks like a grid. And in my experience, when I was first starting my micro locks, when I was doing my research, when I was binge watching YouTube videos, it seemed like everyone was saying that it was absolutely necessary to establish your micro locks with a grid. And if you did not have a perfect grid, then that was going to negatively affect the way your locks looked. Some people were even saying that it was going to affect the health of your locks. So for me, early on, I felt like it was necessary for me to have a grid. I felt so pressured and almost scared that if I did not have a grid, then my micro locks weren't going to turn out very good. At the end of the day, this is my opinion. Other people will have different opinions. Professionals may have different opinions. But for me, and in my experience, I do not feel like it is necessary to have a perfect grid when you are first establishing your micro locks. And that is coming from someone who does not have a perfect grid. As you can see, I don't have a perfect grid at all. When I was about to first start my locks, I definitely did debate whether or not I was going to get a grid. Like I said before, I was feeling a lot of pressure from videos online, and it was making me feel like I really needed a grid. But the more I thought about it, the more I was just like, I really don't want to do this whole grid thing. Number one, I'm not good at parting, specifically on my own head, and I was going to be the one that was going to be establishing my locks. And number two, it just wasn't that serious for me. I just really didn't feel the need for my grid to be super perfect. I really didn't care about having perfectly even, neat, clean boxes in my head. It just wasn't that serious for me. So for me personally, it just wasn't something that I did when I first started my locks. Now, I do want to get into why it could be beneficial to have a grid, because this is not a video of me bashing grids. I think it's definitely understandable why someone would want a perfectly clean grid. So something that a lot of people say when they say that you have to have a grid when you're starting your locks is that the grid is the foundation of your locks. The grid determines what your locks end up looking like. And at the end of the day, technically this is true. The grid is definitely the foundation of your locks. And if you start with a clean grid, yeah, your locks are going to end up looking more even and clean. So if that is something that is super important to you, then yeah, I would maybe recommend doing the grid. They also say that if you are someone that's going to be getting styles done a lot, then it's going to be best to have a nice clean grid. And I would say that that's definitely true for sure as well, if that's something that you care about. If when you are going to be getting these styles that you want it to look as even and neat as possible, then I would say that it probably makes sense for you to have that nice grid. Again, if that's something that is important to you. If you're someone that is going to be getting those styles done pretty often. It also could make your hair easier to retie. Me personally, I am someone that does self-retie and I do not have a grid. In my personal experience, I have not struggled to do my reties just because I don't have a clean grid. Obviously, I don't have a perfect grid, so I don't have anything to compare it to. I will say that especially at this point in my journey, my reties are not difficult at all. So whether or not it makes the reties easier to do, I can't really attest to, but I can definitely see why it would make the reties look more clean. So now I want to talk about some cons of having a perfect grid. And I don't even know that I would call these actual cons. They're just things that you want to consider if you are someone that is considering having a clean, perfect grid. So number one, it can be difficult to do, especially if you are someone like me that is not very good at parting your own hair. And establishing a perfect grid is going to be very, very difficult because you're going to have to be very precise with your parting. So if you're going to be establishing your locks yourself, just keep that in mind. And if you're really adamant about having a clean grid and you're also really adamant about not going to the salon and having a professional do it, maybe get a friend to help you. Because when I first started establishing my locks, I was like, okay, you know what? Let me try to at least do this. And I got very frustrated very quickly because it was pretty difficult to do and I quickly gave up. And then if you are someone that cannot do it by yourself, but you're still adamant on having those clean parts, then you're going to have to go somewhere and get it done. And guess what? That costs money. You're going to have to pay. And especially these days where microlocks are getting more and more and more trendy and popular, the price is going up. So I started my locks 4 years ago and it was getting pretty popular at that point in time, but now it's even more popular than it was 4 years ago. And the price back then was still a little bit pricey for me personally. These days it's even more. It's definitely not me deterring you from going to a professional and getting your microlocks established. If that's something that you want to do and you want to invest in, 100% do it. And I definitely don't think that there's anything wrong with these professionals charging what they're worth to provide their services, especially if it's a great service. But it still may be a cost that you don't want to or can't pay for or afford. So just consider whether or not you're willing to make that investment to get your clean grid. Now, if any of those things are factors that you don't care about, if you don't care about your hair looking perfect, if you don't care about clean parts, if you don't get styles very often, or if you don't feel like your parts have to look perfectly even in those styles, then I would say that you don't really need a perfect grid. For me, I'm actually someone that likes a more imperfect look. I like a more natural look. I actually don't like a super perfect look with my parts. So for me, a grid ended up being something that just wasn't that important to me. Like I said, on top of the fact that I just wasn't very good at parting my hair, I'm impatient, really didn't want to put all that effort in to even do it. I don't get my hair styled that often. And even if I were to get styles done often, I just wouldn't care about a super perfect looking grid. And I also saved a lot of money by doing it myself. And for me, I would say that my hair turned out pretty good. Now, some people might look at my hair and be like, oh my goodness, look at her scalp. She does not have those perfect parts. It doesn't look that good. And that's fine because guess what? It's my hair and not yours. And if you are someone that is starting your microlock journey, you are able to start your journey, establish your locks however you want to. So yeah, this is something that I definitely don't like to try to convince people either way about. Just because I don't have a grid, I definitely don't look down on people that do have grids because I completely understand why someone would want a perfect grid. I really think at the end of the day, it all just comes down to preference and what you care about when it comes to your locks. Do you like neatness or do you like a more natural look? Are you good at parting your hair or are you not good at parting your hair? Do you want to invest in a loctician or do you not want to invest in a loctician? Me personally, I am perfectly happy with how my locks came out without having a grid. If you are someone that is considering getting microlocs, I would definitely recommend you make the decision that you feel like is best for you. And at the end of the day, if you don't like it, you can always comb them out and start over, especially when it's super early in your lock journey and your locks have not begun to actually lock. It's going to be easy to comb them out and start over. If you catch it early enough, you may not even have to actually comb it out, especially if you started with 2-strand twists. Depending on your hair, you would still be able to unravel them for at least the first couple of months. So you can always start with maybe not a perfect grid, see if you like it. If it's still early in the game, go ahead and unravel your twist and start over. So as much as people talk about how locks are so permanent, in my personal opinion, I personally don't believe locks are permanent. They can be undone. It may be difficult to undo them, but you can comb out your locks. You can even cut them off if you feel like it. So locks are not permanent. But at the point you feel like your grid's just not what you want it to be, even though it could be inconvenient, it could be time consuming, you can always start over. Make the decision you feel is best for you. And then in the future, if you have to change that decision, then do it. So yeah, for me, the bottom line is a grid is not necessary and it all comes down to personal preference. Make the decision that is best for you. All right, guys, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video here. If you guys have any questions for me about my grid, about my journey, about what I did when I first established my locks, go ahead and drop them in the comments. And also drop in the comments if you are someone that has microlocks. Let me know whether or not you have a perfect grid and whether or not you regret it or not. Like if you could go back and start the journey again, would you have a perfect grid or would you just do natural parting? Let's talk about it. All right, and if you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for joining me for another video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.